happiness isn't bad. Let's all agree. But I am going to chop it up a little bit here and hack it up some. I'm going to come at happiness a little bit today. But bear with me because you'll see my point and then you'll have an aha moment, I believe, if you haven't already in this category. But there's a big time conflict going on, a huge conflict out there in addition to all the other conflicts. But it's happening within ourselves. It's happening inside you and me, and we're very confused. We're very misled, and we're very tormented without even knowing we're being tormented between this conflict of joy and happiness. I published a book last September of 2020 during COVID, during the quarantine, and I have a chapter in it called The Joy Conflict. And I believe that we are in this battle of thinking that happiness is the same thing as joy and that they're interchangeable and that they look the same and feed us in the same way and take on the same identity as each other. And they don't. So I'm here to tell you today, joy is different than happiness. And happiness can contaminate our psyche, our spirit a little bit if we allow it to have more of an impact and play more of a role within us than it should. So today, I'm going to call it the happy imposter. I believe happiness is an imposter. I believe it's a poser. I believe it poses as joy. It's not bad, but it's kind of the topsoil, and joy is the bedrock, right? I even say, one's transactional, one is contractual. Like transactional means in the business world, transactional is just kind of deal to deal, moving from one sale to the next, one transaction to the next. It's really not guaranteed the next day. Contractual is obviously a contract that's binding, that's sustainable, that's consistent, that's there from one day or month or year to the next. So I believe happiness falls in transactional category. I believe joy falls in contractual category. I mean, I kind of think happiness is like the water boy on the football team. It wears the jersey and it stands on the sidelines and it likes to pretend that it's part of the actual fabric of the team, but really the nucleus of what drives the engine that makes the team successful and is the core foundation of the team is joy. I mean, happiness could even be equated to, metaphorically speaking, kind of the spackle in our day. If you think about sheetrock, if it has holes in it, we're spackling those holes, right? We're not ripping down the wall and redoing the entire thing, but we're spackling, it's patchwork. I believe happiness is patchwork. So we're spackling. It's not the actual sheetrock foundation of the wall in the structure that is our personality, our psyche, our mental state, our spirit even. So I think it's the filler that covers up some of the disappointment or frustration, right? In our day as we go along, we're kind of seeking this happiness component because we think we're joyful people if we're happy. I'm here to tell you today, this is going to be a paradigm shift in the way we approach this topic. I had to really come to this realization because I found myself running on empty throughout the day when I was solely basing my satisfaction, fulfillment, contentment on this happiness that was fleeting or that was dependent on other people, other situations and circumstances. Being in sales, my happiness was at one point dependent on my customers buying what I'm selling, my customers actually giving me access to create dialogue and execute and articulate a message that might convince them or have influence over them to change a buying pattern or behavior. That can't drive my internal, like that can't be my internal engine of contentment and joy and peace and fulfillment. That can't be, but we all often slip into that state of mind of happiness is where it's at. If I'm not happy, then I'm depressed. If I'm not happy, then I'm hopeless. If I'm not happy, then maybe I failed or am a failure. I'm here to tell you there's good news for you. If you get on board this train that we're moving through, coming through your city right now, okay? So I don't know. I kind of liken it happiness to the water boy. I like that. It's football season. I do the analogy thing. You know how we do this, and but that's how I view it. Right? We like having the water boy there. We need him sometimes, right, to kind of give us that shot in the arm, that water, that drink, and that hydration. But it's temporary, right? We're going to be back multiple times to that fountain. But he's on the sideline. He feels important, right? So he's not bad. We need him, but he's really a filler. He's not the nucleus. So I I felt like beating that dead horse a little bit, and now we've kind of poured the slab. We kind of have the foundation of this talk, and you kind of get where I'm coming from, because there's a misconception, and I believe if we look at a lot of the conflicts, not just the joy and happiness conflict within ourselves, we look at the conflicts in the world on, at the very least, social media. And we start to see this division. We start to see this conflict, this confrontation. We start to see this turmoil, division. At the bare minimum, we start to see this cattiness and argumentative dissension amongst people because we're not seeing everything exactly the same. We don't look exactly the same. We don't believe exactly the same. We don't vote exactly the same. But I think it's because at the core, at the root of this, we're all searching for the wrong thing. We're looking for this happiness that evaporates. And it's also, oh, by the way, a sliding scale of it's transactional. It's dependent. Joy is not dependent. Our joy inside is about a bigger picture. It's about a creator. Happiness is about creation. It's about a creator that did what he did for us to have eternal life with him. The joy in knowing he sent himself, his son, in skin, human form to die, and then 3 days later arise, right? Be resurrected. Like that's what differentiates Christianity from every other religion that might believe in a God that maybe cares about them in their mind and is good in their mind, and but may even believe in our God. But the resurrection is what sets it apart. That's where our joy comes in, right? So again, happiness is the creation. It's based on creation. It's based on external factors. It's based on people, circumstances. It's based on the wrong things, really. Even though happiness isn't bad, it's not sustainable. Joy is sustainable because it is foundational, like I said. And it's based on the hope we have of eternity, the promises we have from our Creator of peace, joy. Here we go, joy again. We have the promises of eternal life, the promises of prosperity, the promises of good health and healing, the Spirit that lives in us, the promises of wisdom, right? These things that we just have to ask our Creator for are not temporary. They're contractual. They're sustainable. They're permanent, I will say. So again, I go back to, I think that's part of what we can mitigate some of our dissension on your street, in your schools, at your church, even on a big scale in Washington, D.C., in social media. Like, we can mitigate. Yeah, we're people. Yeah, we're broken. Yeah, it's a fallen world. Thanks, Adam and Eve. Appreciate you. But yeah, that we're going to have a degree, right? There's going to be an element of hate, evil, darkness, dissension. But I think we can come to a common ground if we all are searching for the right thing, which is this joy component. And we got to get right spiritually if we're going to experience true joy. So if I'm talking to anybody out there that isn't a believer, isn't a faith-based Christian, if I'm talking to that person, then we got to get you to a baseline of faith in the right things, belief in a creator, a resurrection of a savior. So those are the basics to experience the true joy I'm talking about today. So we're going to go into a couple things, 3 things to be exact, 3 facts about joy and happiness. All right. The house divided. If you got a house in football season and one spouse is graduated from one school and the other one graduated from another school and they're rivals, right? So the house divided during football season, especially for that one game for sure that they play each other. So happiness and joy, I believe, is a house divided. We need both, right? Happiness isn't bad, but I'm going to tell you how it's different. I'm going to tell you why you want joy and why it's not. Happiness isn't what it thinks it is. It's not really a part of the team, even though it might get in the team photo. It's not really a driver for success of the team. So the first one, I got 3 facts here. I got 3. We always do 3, right? 5, 3. We always do this weird thing, but 3. I'm going to give you 3. Happiness is fleeting. I think I talked about that. But to recap, like, it feels like a roller coaster. This happiness ride feels like a roller coaster because of some of the things I mentioned, and depending on these extraneous factors that are beyond any sort of control we might have of a person, place, or thing filling a void within us. It's fleeting. It's a roller coaster. Like, I would even say happiness is one of those. It's the employee that's never on time. It's the employee you can't rely on, right? It's unreliable because people are unreliable if that's where we're searching for this fulfillment and contentment that only joy really can bring. Like, there's always going to be a little hole in our spirit, in our heart, in our mind. There's going to be a hole there if we can't get joy distinguishable and then fill that hole with the right thing that encompasses the joy. I mentioned that earlier. Those things that are eternal that we know we can stand on, right? One of these things is shakeable. One of them's foundational. One of them doesn't move. Joy doesn't move. If I lose my job, God forbid, joy doesn't move. My happiness needle moves, doesn't it? Joy stands anyway in the face of fill in the blank. If my wife and I have a conflict and it lasts a week and we're not talking for a couple days, and guess what? I can still be joyful. Why? Because I know I don't depend on another human being for that within me. Yes, there's pockets within my spirit and within my soul that I depend on that are beyond that. There's things that do affect me that I do need to take note of and acknowledge and receive and pursue. But those are, again, those are ancillary items to this bedrock I call joy. So, yeah, I think happiness is that unreliable employee who is always late that you can't depend on or predict their actions. You can't stand on it foundationally. Happiness is kind of it's the shallow end of the pool, joy's the deep, right? That water is always cooler in the deep end. It's less affected by external temperatures. Shallow water fluctuates in temperature, right? External, the heat causes it to heat up. The cold, it gets cold quicker, right? The deep end pretty much stays pretty steady. Yes, the temperature fluctuates, of course, but the joy runs deep, and that shallow end of happiness really does fluctuate. So happiness is fleeting. That's the first one that I'm talking about today. Second one's going to be happiness is the creation. It's not the creator. The creator determines our joy. The creator set the stage for us to have levels of joy that bring all of these other subcategories of contentment, fulfillment, right? Worth, purpose, destiny, right? Passion. Joy is rooted really around those gifts that we've been given by our God. You know, the joy is the creator aspect. Happiness is actually just the creation because it's dependent on the things that the creator made. Happiness is not our foundation. It's the byproduct. It's an accessory, right? I mean, if you don't have a phone case for your phone, you can still utilize the tools that the phone offers. That phone's still falling in line with its full capability and functionality. That case is nice to have, right? It's kind of like that spackle we talked about. It kind of fills the gap, right? It keeps that phone a little bit encapsulated, I guess, to kind of buffer. It's kind of a buffer, really, to avoid any sort of damage, permanent damage. But the phone is still functional. Happiness is just the accessory, right? The phone is the joy, the foundation, the operating system by which we navigate through this roller coaster of life every day. Again, you know, you call it the happiness hack today, that I'm hacking on it, that I'm dogging happiness. No, we love to laugh, right? We laugh in that moment that kind of teases us a little bit. We laugh in that moment that brings us sort of a temporary enjoyment, I guess. You know, happiness can be enjoyment. It's not a bad thing, of course. It's not what drives us. It shouldn't be. It's definitely not what sustains us. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree, it doesn't change the fact that it's true. Happiness is just, it's frosting Okay. We can frost ourselves, right? But the actual ingredients of this cake, because it's almost lunchtime and I'm hungry. But so yeah, the frosting is nice, but it's not the sustenance within, right? It's not the actual ingredients that fill us. In fact, if you just ate icing, you'd probably almost just get sick and never be fulfilled. Your hunger would never be fulfilled, right? If you ate a lot of cake, you'd probably still get sick, but you would be fulfilled for that time, for a longer period of time. So yeah, happiness is the creation, man. Joy is based on the creator, based on what he stands for, what he gave us, what he continues to do. The fact that he's still God, the same God today as he was 2,000 years ago. Happiness is the byproduct, right? This is why I always say when we fear things or we believe lies of the enemy, the devil, right? The devil was a creation by the creator. So why would we allow his lies to trump the promises of God who created him? That's a sidebar, but it it applies here. The creator and the creation, like I think we need to all our chips need to be in on the creator. Let the things of creation and those things that were made that are out here in the world for us to see appealing to our five senses, let those have the place that they have, but they don't trump the creator. All right, the last one. So we've talked about happiness is fleeting, happiness is the creation. The last one is happiness teases. It's a tease. Uh, I mean, I can go off the rails here a little bit, but going through school, you always had those girls that kind of flirted. They never really committed, right? They just kind of flirted with all the guys, and guys were, their stimulus is, uh, I guess they're stimulated, let's just say, and they like that teasing component that is alluring, right? It's not altogether by nature bad because those are, qualities and attributes meant for people that get together and become a relationship. Those things are normal. It's just how we use them kind of twists and taints that and darkens it a little bit. But so the girl that never commits is the one that just kind of flirts with everybody. Happiness is a big flirt. Happiness comes to us appearing as joy. So then we buy the stock, right? We invest in the happiness. Our personality, our psyche, our emotions invest all in because it feels like joy at the time, but it's really just happiness masquerading, right? It teases us into thinking that it's long term, it's into this commitment. It's going to be reliable for us. It's going to be sustainable for us to have happiness. Can you be happy every day? Of course. All in how you look at things. But that's not the joy foundation. That's why I say we have a conflict between happiness and joy within us. Within our mind, we define those. We have a problem defining those as different. We can't create or compartmentalize this dichotomy of the two, which we should. Because happiness is a big old fat tease. In the moment, it makes us feel better. In a moment where we may experience frustration or disappointment or a setback, and then we hear a joke on the radio and it makes us laugh, right? That's happiness. That had a role. That plays a role, but it is what it is, and that's it. We move on. Like, we can't invest fully in those little sporadic transactional moments, like I said earlier. Even if you are lucky enough to be able to string together several happy, fleeting tease moments in your day of happiness, right? If you're able to string that throughout, I guarantee you something happens in your day that knocks you off that horse because your joy, the bedrock of your joy, isn't what it needs to be because it's based on the wrong things. But hey, in that moment, it'll make you feel better, finger quotes. And if we have enough feel better moments throughout our day, it feels like we're a joyful person. But I think you need to re-examine. I think you need to look inward, look internally, be honest with yourself and decide, hey, is my joy really joy? Is it based on the spiritual side of things, spiritual side of the house, eternal perspective, or is it based on these other things on the other side of the house that are temporary, which would qualify it as happiness, like I think we've clarified. And so, like, the last part of this happiness is a tease, is we need to understand what our DNA looks like. Like, what makes up our DNA emotionally, psychologically, relationally, just those things that could be confused as joy or happiness, right? So joy becomes part of our DNA. It's a part that is unwavering. So when we understand God's goodness, his promises, we fill in that hole. Like I said earlier, we have a hole, we fill that void because we've got our DNA in line. We know what that makeup is. We know what it's comprised of. It's comprised of the things that don't move, don't change, don't fluctuate, don't disappoint, don't tease. That's what it's made of. It's our DNA. So hey, how do you get right here? How do you get back to square one, right? How do we get both feet planted on the ground with this joy, happiness conflict? Like, how do you get real enough to get in the mirror and find out, am I joyful or am I just happy? Laughter is the best medicine, it says. I would argue that God's promises and the certainty of our eternity is the best medicine long term, consistently. But laughter is great. It revolves around happiness, though, not joy. Laughter comes, it's an outward expression, right, of a moment in time that made us happy. Nothing wrong with that. But this eternal perspective gives us a smile on the inside that never dies, never fades, never fluctuates, never changes. And it's the hope and the eternal promises of a good God who is with us always that never changes. So I hope you understand now the difference. I hope you got clarity like I got clarity a while back that there is a conflict. Joy and happiness are not the same. One lasts, one's fleeting. One depends on the creator, one depends on creation. With that, be blessed.